Are you ready to live life to the full? Are you ready to rise up and live a life of honor? Are you ready to boldly step into a life of courage? This is the Manlihood ManCast.
Welcome to the Manlihood ManCast. I'm your host, Josh Hatcher. Listen, today's interview we have author and journalist Chuck Holton. Chuck's book, Making Men, is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. A lot of the guys that are in the man cave or that have been following the Manlihood ManCast have heard me talk about this book before, and I know many men have gone through it and applied the principles to their lives, and it's made a big difference. Chuck is a former Army Ranger. I think it's a lot like the Marines, though. You don't say former. I think you still say Army Ranger when you're not. And he's a journalist that goes all over the world into dangerous and crazy situations. Chuck has a fantastic story and a really great insight into the world of men. So I encourage you to tune in and listen up. While you're waiting, because we'll have him on in just a second, I want you to make sure that you check out manlihood.com/store. That's where you can get apparel like a Manlihood t-shirt or hoodie or a mug or something like that. You can also get the books and resources that I've created there. They're available for you at manlihood.com/store. So we'll be back in just a moment with Chuck Holton.
Hey man, I see you. I see your fire going out. I see your marriage barely holding on. I know you're broke, wore out, and at the end of your rope. I've been there, and it sucks. It sucks the spark right out of you, till all you have left is a pile of wet wood. It feels like it's never gonna burn. I can't fix your problems. I can't make her love you again. I can't lose 50 pounds for you or fill your bank account. But I can remind you of who you are. I can share some of my fire. I can help you make a plan to get your life back on track. So let's go. Let's do this. Let's reignite our lives. There's a lot at stake. No one wants their marriage to end in divorce. No one wants to wallow in despair or to the dark places that follow. So let's do it. Let's reignite our lives. Let's reignite our passion, our marriage, our health, our careers, our dreams, our mindsets. Get reignite today.
Chuck, it's great to have you on the Manlihood ManCast. How are you doing today?
I have been looking forward to this for quite a while, ever since I found the Manlihood ManCast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know, so have I, to be honest with you. It's been a little while. I didn't have all of my stuff set up to be able to do recording, and so now here we go. I'm kind of excited. I've done several interviews now, and we're just kind of growing from here. So, Chuck, you are living in Panama right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We live here full time. We still have a place in the States, but we've lived in Panama now since, we made the decision to move on election night, 2012.
That's awesome. What's it like there? Tell me maybe the culture, the atmosphere, that kind of stuff. What's it like?
Yeah, you know, one of the reasons we decided to move here was just because it's kind of like going back in time in the United States to when I was a kid. The culture here is very traditional. It's not very fragmented and divided like it is in the United States today. It's still a very free country for the most part. And prayer is required in schools. Abortion is illegal. Women stay home and take care of the kids, and men go off to work. And so there's a real harmonious balance in the culture. If your kids want to go play, they can. We live in a little town of about 6,000 people here in a volcanic crater, and everybody knows everybody. You can ride your bike all over town. Your kids, just go play. Just like we did when I was a kid. We just ride our bikes off, and our parents had no idea where we were until it got dark. Okay, it was time for supper. They got hungry or whatever, and we're surrounded by nature. The year-round growing season, and we're kind of high enough up in the mountains that it's not like sweaty tropical weather. It's more like about mid-70s all the time, kind of like springtime all year round. And so, I mean, it's hard to complain about that for sure.
Yeah. And again, I think you told me earlier, you're a citizen, so you still have all the rights and privileges of being an American, and then the advantage of enjoying a slower, laid-back culture as well, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, we have it'd be like a green card in the United States. We're permanent residents here, and you're right. It can be quite a bit less expensive as far as living concerns, but in reality, the biggest way that I save money by living here is on my taxes, and that's because A, I don't pay any state tax. That saves me a lot. But B, since most of my work is outside the United States, I can then qualify for the foreign income exclusion. And that means that between my wife and I, we can write off about the first 200 and something thousand and pay no tax federally on that. So I would say, if you added up all the state taxes, all the taxes that I save by living here, and maybe throw on top of that the amount of shopping my wife doesn't do on Amazon since we live here.
Right.
It saves me more than it costs me to live here, and so I see that as a win-win.
That's awesome. So let's get into some of the questions I wanted to ask and talk to you about. Your book, Making Men, it's had a huge impact on a lot of men that I personally know. A lot of the guys actually that I'm connected with our church or in our community, it's been a movement here. Honestly, we're probably most of the books you've sold are probably right here in this small town that I live in. But you spell out some really important tenets about masculinity, about manhood, and kind of define it. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What from that perspective in the book that you talk about, what does it look like for you? What does it mean to be a man? And
I woke up one day in my mid-30s and said, holy cow, I've got 3 little boys and I'm supposed to make men out of these guys. And to be honest, I'm not sure I've got that figured out for me yet. And I don't know if you've ever gone through this, but just like starting to go, how old do I have to be before people consider me to be actually a man? Like, well, what point do you reach that stage? And especially if you live in a place where there's a lot of older people and they're always calling you, hey, young man, and you're going, I'm 40. Like, what do I have to do here? So I decided that as a journalist, I would just sort of track down and try to become an expert on the subject of manhood. And I did that by looking at ancient cultures and how they defined manhood, looking at mature men that I knew and talking to them and asking them how they defined it. And then going through the Bible several times and looking for examples that it gives of men who did things right and men who did things wrong. Sometimes that's the same man, but just at different times. And so just tried to then take all of that information and distill it down to its most foundational precepts. Something simple that I could teach my 12-year-old and that he would be able to get. Because as I watched young men, I did a lot of speaking at youth groups and schools, men's retreats, things like that. And as I watched those young men, I realized that a lot of those really stupid behaviors that they engage in are actually desperate attempts to prove to the world that they have got what it takes to be a man. And I realized that I had done the same thing when I was a kid. We used to jump off the roof of my house and play this game where you had to dive into the bushes, and if you stuck, you won, and if you fell out, it's amazing we survived to be teenagers.
And if you died, you lost.
Right, if you die, you lost, right. And we'd shoot at each other with BB guns, we'd jump our bikes off and throw dirt clods. Everything, and so much of that, as I look back, was really a fledgling attempt to try to prove myself as a man. And so I wanted my sons, when they started to ask those questions, to be able to act out of a strength and not act out of a weakness, not act out of their insecurity, but act out of their confidence that they knew what they needed to do to become a man. And so I was in the military, and that means that I like acronyms, and I came up with this acronym, SHAPE, that helps young men and old men memorize the steps to manhood. So as I realized as I went through it, you can't even start down the road to manhood until you submit to the one who bestows the gift of manhood, your creator. That's submission. And I'll just go through them really quick. The second step is understanding which things are important and which things are not important, and then treating them as such. That's called honor. That's what we mean when we say honor. Honor denotes value. It just means to value things rightly. So treating things that are worthless as if they are worthless is probably the hardest thing that men have to do in everyday life in America. Treating things that are important as if they're important is marginally less difficult, but only a little bit. But it's getting rid of those worthless things that is the hard part. Because a lot of those worthless things are fun. So that's honor. Then when a boy starts to make that shift into manhood, you notice because he starts to look around him and get outside of his own head and be concerned about more than his own pleasure and comfort and safety. He begins to be concerned with assessing the world around him and improving that world, making it a better place. And then when he makes that jump, then the outgrowth of that is that he stops thinking only about himself and he starts thinking about the needs of others. And he dies to his own desires and he provides for the needs of others. So I couldn't make it the shade of a man. That wouldn't make any sense. So instead of saying he dies to his own desires, we said he perishes to his own desires. And that let us make it the shape of a man. Made more sense. But he perishes to his own desires and provides for the needs of others. Then the last one is just that a man's greatest enemy is himself. The passivity that we all face wells up from within and is encouraged from without. Our culture encourages us to be passive because passive equals safe to the world. When you're on it, when you're engaged, when you're getting after it, you're powerful, and that scares people. That might make you a little too intense for some people. But that's what we're called to do as men, and that's how we become powerful as men. So by shunning passivity and engaging in every area of life, as I went through this, I realized that last step really needed to be a book all by itself, because you engage in every area, and every time you do, things get better. Every time you don't, fear creeps in, resentment creeps in, anger creeps in. And so to be engaged socially and spiritually and physically and from a business standpoint or academically or financially or relationally, all of those ways have a major effect on who I am. And when I engage, those things get better. When I am passive, they get worse. And so the outgrowth of my realization that last step was so involved and there was so much to it that it needed to be its own book, that led to my next book, which just came out this year, and that's called Prowess. It's getting very good. Prowess just means being the skillful display of manly power. Doing that well, engaging well with the world around you and with yourself. And so it's an ongoing thing, especially, it's nice to watch my own sons as I've gone through this with them, starting when they were 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old. And I've been very intentional about teaching them these 5 steps and even teaching them to my daughters. And then watching the effect that it's had on their life, where they go, yeah, Dad, I've got a son that's in the Army. Yeah, Dad, all the guys are going out and getting tattoos, but, to me, that's just a manifestation of weakness. Because God made me just like this. Why do I need to improve on that other than to try to make people think I'm something? I've always told my boys, the first thing people should notice about you is your character. It shouldn't be the tattoo in the middle of your face. And that's not to say that tattoos are sinful. It's not to say that they're wrong necessarily. It's just to say that the vast majority of people that I have met who have a tattoo, I like to ask people about them. Like, hey, that's an interesting beluga whale on your chest. Why do you have that on there? You know, and because people don't do those things for no reasons. You wouldn't do that and then not want anybody to notice. So I like to notice and ask them. And I would say the number one answer I get is I was drunk. The number two answer I get is kind of an eye roll and, well, I was young, you know, or something like that. But then I'll often get people that will actually have a very good reason why they got a tattoo. And that's a great conversation starter. That's fantastic. But I would say at least 2/3 of the people I talk to, it tends to have been an outgrowth of immaturity or insecurity that caused them to do that to themselves, and something permanent that you don't get to take back. And so it's nice to watch my sons. I don't care if they get a tattoo. I really don't. But I just don't want them to act out of their weakness. I don't want them to act out of insecurity. And I don't want them to think that putting some stain on your body is going to somehow build a facade that's going to impress people, when what they really should be impressed by is the way that you engage with the world around you. That's what should impress people. So anyway, that's where the book came from.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely highly encourage everybody to grab a copy and read through it. I haven't read Prowess yet. I'm hoping to grab that. Do you have the?
I'll send you a copy.
That's awesome. Is it available on Amazon if somebody's looking for it? Is that where you sell it, or do you sell it elsewhere?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Okay.
It's on Amazon, and we've got audio version and a print version as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a fantastic book, and would definitely like to look into it. You know, with me, when I read it, the chapter that I think punched me in the gut was when you were talking about passivity, and realized, I mean, that was my life, man. Like, if it was hard, it was easier to put it off. If it was difficult, if it took effort, if it took discipline, it was easier just to let it happen and then deal with it later. But I mean, you know this. I mean, if you do that, then it becomes an even bigger mess you got to clean up later. So that's
it snowballs, and you don't live up to your potential by any stretch.
Yeah, it really spoke to me and helped. I mean, honestly, it has a lot to do, I think, with me rising above a lot of my own stuff. So I really appreciate it, and all of that together makes a lot of sense, you know, for guys where they're at. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of this manhood stuff in a minute. I think this is related, though. You talked about your career as a journalist, and I've been kind of following what you're doing online for a little while, some of the stories you've doing. I mean, from, walking along with your camera along with the Antifa riots, or getting shot at in Syria, or traveling with the migrant caravan. That's just a few of the things that I've seen that you've done. What's the stickiest situation that you've been in as you've been doing this as a career? Well,
I mean, the whole Antifa riots thing was pretty exciting. Although I wasn't really scared being there, just because I felt like, you're in a big public place. Even though these guys brought 1,000 of their buddies, I could probably snap any of those guys in half. I did get assaulted twice during that the Inauguration Day riots by Antifa guys for taking photos and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I was there with my son, my oldest son, and he was backing me up, so it was cool. I almost got kidnapped in Venezuela last year, and that didn't scare me at the time, but afterwards I kind of thought about it a little bit and thought what the outcome of that could have been, and that could have been really bad. I would say probably the closest I've come to getting killed has been in Syria, just in the last couple of trips over there fighting against ISIS. If you're familiar with the Free Burma Rangers, Dave Eubank and his crew, I've kind of worked with them and reported on them for, I don't know, probably 13 or 14 years now. And I've gotten more and more involved with them all the time, to the point where this last trip, I just was like, you know what? I'm here as a ranger first and as a journalist second, because I so believe in what they're doing. Basically what they do is, just for those who don't know, any war zone where people are in need, where people are getting hurt, there's a gap between where the people are actually getting hurt and where they can get some help. And that gap is because it's too dangerous in there for traditional NGOs to go in to the fray and help people. So wounded folks typically have to get themselves through that gap. And that might be a kilometer or two. It might be a 4-hour drive. I mean, it might be really far. So the Free Burma Rangers are basically a bunch of old special operations guys that and medics that we have a bunch of armored vehicles and armored ambulances or whatever. And we go into that gap and we go right up to the front line where people are trying to escape from ISIS or where they're fleeing the battle. And we throw them in our ambulances, whatever, get them back to the nearest hospital or aid station or whatever it is, and try to keep them alive in the process. When I was in Syria last February, we were there right at the end of the fight against ISIS, and ISIS was on its last legs, but they were not dead by any stretch. And they had about 30,000 people crammed into like 2 square kilometer area right along the Euphrates River, surrounded on one side by the Syrian army and the Russians, and the other side by the Americans and the Kurds. And a lot of people were trying to escape from there. Many of them were family members of ISIS, their wives and children. The day before we showed up, they had 19 Kurdish soldiers killed by people that were fleeing, who then blew themselves up as soon as they got to safety. And so it was very dangerous. In that mission, FBR treated like 40,000 refugees and wounded. So I mean, it was, and you're talking about 24 people, 24 guys. That's quite a team. Camping out in the desert in Syria, carrying weapons for our own defense, not offense, not looking for a fight by any stretch. But one of the rules of the Free Burma Rangers is that if the people can't run, then we won't run. And if that means getting overrun by the enemy and getting killed, that's what's going to happen. So we're not going to leave people. We won't leave anybody behind. And so that means that sometimes it's necessary to have a weapon and defend the people that you're with. Otherwise, we're all going to get killed. And since we have the wherewithal and the inclination to do that, and the permission, I would add, from the people who control that area, the Syrian Kurds, then we carry weapons and we'll use them if we have to. On this last mission in November, it was far worse, and that's because the refugees were Christians and Kurds from Syria that were being driven out by the remnants. It was by the Turkish military, and the Turkish military is I think the 8th largest military in the world. It's like going up against the U.S. military. I mean, we're going up against ISIS. They've got AK-47s and RPG launchers. You're going up against the Turks. They've got tanks and artillery and drones and F-16s, and they're not afraid to use them against military or civilian. They don't care who you are. They were killing doctors left and right. And they actually they had about 40,000 guys at the fall of Raqqa back in 2015 who were ISIS fighters that made a deal with the Turks to switch sides and fight for the Turks. And they became what's now known as the Free Syrian Army. They're just as brutal as ISIS because they are ISIS. They're ISIS 2.0, but now they're backed up by drones and tanks and artillery and things like that. So it was far more dangerous. And on this last trip, we were under fire literally on a daily basis. And sometimes, you're watching your buddies running for the vehicle with bullets going between their feet. And I mean, that's far too close for comfort. That's not cool. It was really a emotionally difficult time for me because when you make that commitment, as when you going in as a ranger, okay, we're going to make that commitment. We're going to not leave anybody behind. And that means these Syrian civilians as well. I kind of realized at some point after a particularly hairy ambush where we'd been ambushed and barely got out with our lives. I don't really love these people that much. Like, I don't know them I don't love these Syrians enough to lay down my life for them. And I say that to my shame. I should, but I don't. And so I struggled with, can I really do this? And then in talking with Dave Eubank, the founder of the FBR, and being honest with him about that, he kind of made the point, well, I mean, we don't necessarily do it because we love them so much. We do it because we love Jesus so much. And Jesus is calling us to help these people. And so we're going to stay and help them. And we're going to trust Jesus for whether we live or die. And I do love Jesus enough to stay if he's calling me to stay. And so I don't have to love those people directly. I just have to love them as a show of gratitude to Jesus. And that makes total sense to me. I can stay there. I can keep going back and doing that mission because I do love Jesus enough because of what he's done for me. And I know I can trust him that if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. I don't go over there and say, well, no, I trust Jesus is going to protect me. He has protected me many times. But what I trust Jesus to do is to do the right thing for me. And if it's my time to be done after just in the last couple of months, watching my own mother suffer for months before she passed away from cancer. If I had to get blown up by a drone, like one of my friends did over there 2 days after I left in November, and get killed that way, that would be much preferable to fading away like my mother did over the course of 8 months. And so God's taught me some really hard lessons over the last year in why I do what I do. And the motto of the Free Burma Rangers is, sort of one of the mottos is I won't be driven by comfort or fear or pride. And if I refuse to be driven by comfort or fear or pride, then I'm in the right place. I'm doing the right thing. And nothing done out of love is ever crazy. It might look crazy. People might tell you it's crazy. But if I'm doing it for love, then it can't be crazy. And God, I think, blesses that. So I think what I've learned is that victory doesn't necessarily come by defeating the enemy every time. I'm going to lose some of the battles that I engage in life. I lose the battles against lust. I lose the battles against pride. I lose the battles against, laziness. But victory comes from staying in the fight. Victory comes from being in that battle. That's where the victory is, because that's what I'm called to be doing until the end. I'll retire in heaven, right? I'm a soldier of Jesus Christ first. So if I retire in heaven, then victory means keeping fighting until that day.
It's funny because I had a question and you answered it. I was going to ask you, if you think your training as an Army Ranger has to do with that fearless attitude, but you said you aren't fearless. It just doesn't drive you, I think is kind of what you're saying. There's fear there, but you're not going to let it be what drives you.
I mean, honestly, the kind of fear that you're talking about, that emotion of, oh my gosh, I could, this might hurt or whatever. I haven't felt that kind of fear in many years. What I think supplants it is perhaps that logical thought that, man, a guy could really get hurt doing this. We could really die here today, guys. So maybe we need to think real hard about what we're doing right now. And maybe we need to ask Jesus again if this is what he wants us to do. The way that I actually wrote a whole book about this, but what helped me sort of overcome that feeling of fear, that emotion of fear, is that understanding that I am invincible until God is done with me. My job is to take the next step and the next step and the next step. I actually tell you real quickly a story. about interviewing the military psychologist in charge of the psych evals for all of the Tier 1 special operations guys, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, stuff like that. And I interviewed him for my book, Bulletproof. And he told me that they have found over the years that a guy who has a strong faith foundation will always make a better soldier than a guy who doesn't. Consistently, he will do better in combat than a guy who doesn't have a faith foundation. And I asked him why that was. And he said, well, my belief is that when your worldview tells you that everything is random chance, that everything just happens because it happens, you tend to feel the need to control everything around you. You get very controlling, and you need to kind of keep a handle on everything that's going on all the time. Well, combat by definition is a very uncontrollable environment, and it's total chaos. So your worldview, if that's the way you think, means you're just going to get very task saturated trying to control everything around you. But if you have a worldview that says everything happens for a reason, there is a divine driver to the universe, he's in control, he's all powerful, and he's good, and he cares about me, well, then I can just leave what happens up to him. And I can just focus on doing my job. I can just focus on staying in my lane, right? And just doing what I'm called to do. And when I do that, then the fear goes away, because I'm not steering this bicycle or this ship. I talked to a guy on our Arms Room podcast this last Saturday, and he wrote a book called Get in the Galley and Row. And he's saying, that's what we're called to do is, man, we're not supposed to be up at the helm driving the ship. We're supposed to be down in the galley pulling for all we're worth. And then we don't have to worry where the ship ends up. We can trust God. We don't have to worry how hairy it gets, how smoky it gets, how uncertain it gets, how dark it gets, how hard it gets or painful it gets. All we have to worry about is pulling those oars. Just pulling for all we're worth until the mission is over. And when I understand that that's my only job, I don't have to feel fear, because whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And that victory comes through surrender to the one who's driving the ship.
I love that. I think that it has a lot of applicable lessons, not just in warfare or fighting, or when your life is on the line or other people's lives are on the line. But I think there's some good stuff to unpack there. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. I know that a lot of us are dads. You said you've got 4 kids. Is that right?
I got 3 boys and 2 girls, bookend girls, 3 boys in the middle. And the youngest 2 are 17 years old now, so they're all pretty much grown. I'm trying to talk my wife into 5 more. She says she would miss me. But hopefully I'll have some grandkids coming along here before too long.
Yeah. My oldest 2 got married this summer. They were twins, and they both got married in the same summer. And the next one down he's about to graduate high school, and then the last one is 15. So it's definitely I keep thinking, hey, grandkids, man, that'd be awesome. So
yeah, and you start to look around the house and go, what do we do now? I guess it's just time to die. Guess we're done.
So I know that a lot of our listeners are dads or stepdads, especially I've got a lot of guys that have young kids. What do we need to teach our sons and our daughters, but especially our sons, about manhood? What do you think is the most important thing we can teach them?
Yeah, so I would say that concept that the Free Burma Rangers talks about of not being driven by comfort or fear is so foundational to the process of making a good man, that if I taught that to a 9-year-old only and didn't teach him anything else, just never let yourself be motivated by comfort or fear, that in and of itself would probably be all he would need to make him a good man. as I have been on this lockdown here in Panama, there's been a young man staying with us that kind of got stuck here with us. He's a friend of a family that we know here in Panama. And he's 15 years old, actually turned 16 just last week. We had no idea that he was going to end up spending 9 weeks with us. He came for about 3 days just for the weekend. And while he was here, they locked down the whole country and nobody could go anywhere. So he's been here ever since. So I've just been pouring into him for 9 weeks. We've been literally pouring protein into his body. We've been working out. I had a gym here in town that we had to close down. We brought the whole gym home and put it in the carport. We've been just crushing it with my son who ran the gym, who's 17, every day. We have just spent hours and hours being able to talk through these kinds of things. We've sat him down and made him watch movies like The American Sniper and like Black Hawk Down and stuff that he hadn't seen before, to try to give him a sense of what real combat is like and why it's not glamorous or glorious in any way, but why it's still necessary. And it's been really good just to be able to sit and have this very willing, very interested, enthusiastic young man going, man, yeah, teach me, bring it. I want to know.
And he's going to go home and have gained like 50 pounds of muscle. His
That's
parents
right.
have no idea who this kid is.
That's right. He's going to walk in and look down at his parents and go, you're small. I think he's gained like 14 pounds in the last 2 months. And
awesome.
he's a stud. But he's a great kid, just a great kid. It's very rare to find a young man, 14, 15, 16 years old, who is mature enough to get outside of his own head and actually listen to an adult. Most of the time, he's not going to listen to his parents. If you can find him an uncle or a friend at church or something, all of a sudden that guy can tell him exactly what his dad has been telling him the whole time, and all of a sudden now it's gospel. That's kind of how this has been. But what I've really been focusing on with him is just that concept of don't be motivated by comfort or fear. So, hey, are we working out today? Oh man, I'm just so sore. I'm so tired. Are you being motivated by comfort right now or fear? Which one is it? Yeah. He's like, both. like, yep. All right. That means it's time to look. When you have a decision to make, son, and you don't know which one you should make, the one you want to do the least is almost always the right one.
Right.
All right? So let's make a habit of this together. Boom, boom, boom. He had never fasted before. He certainly didn't need to fast. He's like 110 pounds. But we fasted together just, for 24 hours, just so he could say he did it, just so he could see that he could survive it. And it's been that process of what kind of hardship can we embrace together today so that when you walk out of here, you're going to feel like way more of a man than you were when you walked in, because what makes you feel like a man is having defeated yourself. It's having conquered the guy that you shave. And so you want to gain confidence. You want to gain in your dealings with other men or with women. What you've got to do is you got to conquer this guy. And so it's been a process over the last 9 weeks of just working to help him do that over and over and over again. And it's really pitiful when my youngest daughter, I'll hear her down there going, Mark, are you being motivated by comfort right now?
That's crazy. I love it.
I've had to go down and tell her, no. Like you don't get to talk to him like that. That's not your place, okay?
She's just trying to help.
She is.
No, I love it. That's awesome. Well, I know that you mentioned kind of before we started our interview that the lockdown, like they look like they might be able to let you guys get out soon. How does that looking?
They have extended the lockdown until the 1st of July, basically at this point. But we just found out today about a humanitarian flight from Panama to the United States on the 25th of May. So we're jumping on that thing, man, because I got to get back to work. It's been fun. This has really been, I've always said that for me, a vacation, I mean, when you talk to a guy whose job it is to go to 25 countries a year and, see everything exciting that is happening in the world, My idea of a vacation is a week at home with a power outage so nobody can get a hold of me. And, 2 months at home under quarantine, that's pretty close. We have a very nice place here in Panama, in a beautiful part of the country. And my wife and I mean, we talk about how hard it is to live our priorities. If my priorities are God, my spiritual life, my family life, and my physical life, taking care of my body, if those are the three most important things, and somehow they always get pushed to the end of the line because making a living takes precedence, and it's easier to get slack from over there. Well, when the making a living part gets just taken away from you and there's nothing else to do, this 2 months has been fantastic for me. I have been able to do nothing but work on my spiritual life, my relational life, and my physical life. And I've memorized the entire book of Romans 8, or chapter of Romans 8. I've been working on some of the Beatitudes. I've been, just really pounding Scripture. It's been awesome. I've been able to spend every morning and every evening on the roof. We have a terrace on the roof of the house that has a beautiful view overlooking the mountains with my wife having coffee. I've been able to spend a lot of time pouring into my kids that are left here. And I've been able to just crush it in the gym every day. So this has been fantastic. But I do need to get back to making a living. And so I'm going to have to go somewhere that'll allow me to do that.
Awesome. So if we've got listeners that want to maybe follow some of the stories that you put out, or they want to get any of your books, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
You can Google my name and find out far more about me than you ever wanted to know. Just remember, I was young. I needed the money, but no. I would say probably the majority of the things that I do get aggregated to my author page on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, you can find me on YouTube. I don't really do Insta or Twitter a whole lot, but a little bit over there. Of course, some of my journalism stuff goes on the Christian Broadcasting Network website. I've been, farming stuff out to other outlets as well. Facebook is probably the best place to kind of, see everything, though.
Awesome. I know that you are in the Manlihood Man Cave too, so if some of our guys are in there, they want to shout out to you or touch base with you, I know you've had some great comments over the time that you've been in, so I'm sure they could ask you questions if they want to know. So
yeah, do that. As a matter of fact, when this whole thing started, I lost out on a couple of speaking engagements, and so I thought, you know what, I want to still keep pouring into men. So I started this. It's not a podcast; it's just a Zoom call we do every Saturday called the Arms Room, and started bringing on some leaders of the men's movement, and guys like Jerry Boykin, Jeff Struker, Dave Eubank, Oliver North. We've just had a Victor Marks, a whole bunch of guys on, and having them give little devotionals for guys every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. And we've had hundreds of people on. It's just grown and grown and grown. I have no idea what's going to come of that. My thought was that we would only do it for the period of the quarantine, but I've gotten so much feedback from guys that want to continue it, so for the time being, we're going to keep doing it. So 9 a.m. Eastern, Saturday mornings, we do this thing, get on Zoom, and you can find the link to that on bit.ly/armsroom, or you can go just to my Facebook page and we'll post it there every week.
Awesome. We're definitely going to check it out and encourage our guys to. We'll share the link if anybody wants to tune in. So that's awesome. Thank you very much for that. And anything else you want to share with our guys while we still got you on the line?
Hey, I just want you to know that I've been watching your little short videos you put up, and I've been following the Manlihood Man Cave for a long time, and I really appreciate not just the stuff that you put on there, but the tone of the site. It's really, I think you struck the right chord for men, because one of the things I'm learning as we do this arms room thing is that there are so many guys from so many walks of life. You might live in downtown Cleveland in the inner city, and some other guy might live out in the country in New Mexico on a ranch or something, and your lives might as well be on different planets. But we both have similar needs in the way that we relate to our families and our jobs and things like that. And so it's easy to fall off the wagon and become very sectarian one way or another, get way too charismatic or way too orthodox or whatever. You don't deal with that kind of stuff in the Manlihood Man Cave, and I like that a lot. That you're just sort of catering to men wherever they happen to be, and that's why I think it's a great place for me to be.
Yeah, well, I love having you there. I mean, I know when anybody talks to me, they know that, I'm definitely opinionated, and I definitely have a very strong perspective on things. We probably share a lot of those perspectives, but, I know that we're not going to win if we get fighting over the stuff that really, some of the stuff doesn't matter at all,
You're right. You're right.
So I think that I see a lot of men's groups descend into that, and I don't want to do that. So I think if we focus on the stuff that matters, I think it helps. So I really appreciate that you noticed that. That actually means a lot to me that you caught on to what we're doing there.
That's great. That's great. So, how do you stay looking so young? I want to know that.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I used to tell everybody that it was the fat pushes out the wrinkles, and then I lost 100 pounds, and now the wrinkles are coming back. So it doesn't stay young forever, apparently.
It must just be all that clean living then.
Yeah, that must be what it is. Anyway, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, great talking to you. I enjoyed it.
You want to be a better man? Check out our website, manlihood.com, for blogs, videos, and more from our Manlihood team. Men, you can also join our private Facebook group, Manlihood Man Cave, where you can meet up with a band of brothers who will challenge you and help you on your journey of manhood. Be sure to check out all our resources at manlihood.com/store. This episode is produced by Thatcher Media for manlihood.com. Our manly theme music is from Austin Sterling and also from Mark Cruz. Sure to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, or whatever you're listening to. Tune in again for more of the Manlihood Mancast.